The skyline of Chicago glittered like scattered jewels against the night sky, and from the 52nd floor of the Skyline 52 restaurant, the city looked like a living map of light and movement. Inside the atmosphere was equally dazzling chandeliers, dripped gold onto polished marble floors. Candle flames flickered in crystal holders, and soft jazz hummed beneath the conversations of the city's wealthiest patrons. It was the kind of place where every detail had been designed to impress, and where a single dinner bill could equal a month's rent for someone like Lily Anderson. Lily moved gracefully between tables, balancing trays, with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years hiding her nerves behind perfect posture and polite smiles. At 26, she had long ago learned that waitressing in a high-end restaurant required far more than just carrying plates. It demanded a performance, a mask of poise and competence, no matter what chaos was swirling beneath the surface. Tonight, as every Friday night for the past 3 months, her most nerve-wracking guest had returned. Ethan Cross sat alone at his usual corner table, a position with an unobstructed view of the entire dining room and a clear line to both exits. His presence was magnetic. At 35, the billionaire CEO of Cross Dynamics carried himself with a kind of restrained power that made people lower their voices without realizing why. His dark suit was impeccably cut, his silver watch gleamed under the low light, and his storm-colored eyes never seemed to stop moving, always calculating, always assessing. Most people saw only the wealth and mystery. Lily saw something more, a man who never let his guard down. She approached his table carrying the bottle of Barolo he always ordered, vintage rich a taste of Italy that cost more than her paycheck for the week. She placed the bottle on the table, retrieved the corkscrew, and performed the ritual of opening it with steady hands. As she poured, her attention flickered to the glass before him, already filled by another server, while she had been attending to another party. At first glance it looked fine, but Lily's eyes, trained by years of studying tiny details, and reinforced by her unfinished degree in behavioral psychology, caught something odd. The liquid shimmered darker than it should. Tiny bubbles clung to the surface, unnatural for this particular wine. She frowned almost imperceptibly, leaning closer as if to adjust the napkin. And that was when she saw it. Across the room, one of the junior waiters stood half hidden near the service station. His eyes kept darting toward Ethan's table, not with casual curiosity, but with the sharp, guilty focus of someone waiting for something specific to happen. His jaw tightened, his shoulders hunched in forced stillness. Every micro-expression screamed tension and anticipation. Lily's heart gave a violent kick. She looked back at the wine glass, then at the stranger's face, then at Ethan, who was already reaching for the stem with long, steady fingers. In that instant, her instincts made the choice her conscious mind could barely process. She bent down close enough that only he could hear, and whispered against the hum of conversation, "Don't drink this." The words were soft, urgent, and carried the weight of her conviction. Ethan's eyes snapped up to meet hers, sharp and questioning. For a heartbeat, the entire restaurant seemed to pause. Then, instead of lifting the glass to his lips, he set it back on the white linen tablecloth. The simple motion was smooth, deliberate, but the atmosphere around them shifted instantly. 2 men in dark suits who had been posing as diners at nearby tables rose subtly to their feet. They crossed the space with silent precision, converging on Ethan's table. One reached for the glass while the other positioned himself between Ethan and the rest of the room. The wine was lifted, carefully examined under the light, and then tested with a discreet chemical strip pulled from a pocket. The result appeared within seconds. The strip darkened not with the faint trace of alcohol as expected, but with a vivid discoloration that signaled something far more sinister: poison. A low murmur of confusion spread among the closest guests as the glass was whisked away. The younger waiter who had been watching turned on his heel, attempting to slip into the kitchen corridor, but security intercepted him before he made 3 steps. The scene unfolded with such quiet efficiency that most patrons assumed it was a minor disturbance, perhaps an unruly staff member. They had no idea a billion-dollar empire had just been protected from collapse by a single whisper. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. His storm-gray eyes never left Lily's face, as if measuring the reason behind her intervention, as if searching for the truth in her steady gaze. He did not thank her, not yet. He only studied her silent composed while his men dealt with the poisoned glass and the trembling employee who had nearly destroyed everything. For Lily, the shock of what had just occurred pulsed through her veins. She had wanted nothing more than to finish her shift, collect her tips, and go home to the small apartment she shared with her younger sister. Instead, she had stepped into a world she had no business entering, a world of wealth, secrets, and danger. But one fact was undeniable. She had saved the life of Ethan Cross. The moment the poisoned glass was taken away, the atmosphere inside Skyline 52 shifted from elegant calm to hushed tension, though most patrons remained blissfully unaware of the real danger that had just passed. Ethan Cross sat perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the trembling junior waiter, who was now being escorted discreetly through a side exit by 2 security men dressed like ordinary guests. Lily Anderson felt her breath catch in her throat, her pulse hammering so loudly she thought someone might hear it. Yet she forced herself to keep her posture straight and professional. She had done the unthinkable, intervened in the life of the city's most enigmatic billionaire, and now there would be consequences she could neither predict nor control. Moments later, the illusion of normalcy shattered when whispers spread through the restaurant. Rumors flitted from table to table. Speculation about why a server was dragged out by men in suits, and why a billionaire's glass had been whisked away like evidence. Within an hour, despite Ethan's meticulous command over his public image, the story leaked. A staff member had tried to poison Ethan Cross during a quiet Friday dinner. News alerts hit cell phones, bloggers posted speculation, and within minutes, media vans were already circling the skyscraper headlights, glaring as if sharks sensed blood in the water. But Ethan was no ordinary target. He did not rise in panic. He did not shout. He did not allow chaos to dictate the narrative. Instead, he simply stood, placed a few crisp bills on the table, as if concluding an ordinary meal, and nodded to his security team. Lily found herself guided gently but firmly toward the staff corridor, her protests muted by the weight of what had just occurred. By the time they reached the back exit of Skyline 52, the service alley was alive with flashing cameras and the shouts of journalists desperate for a statement. Ethan's chief of staff, Sofia Delgado, tall and elegant in a charcoal suit, was already there, orchestrating the defense. She barked into her phone, coordinating with lawyers and public relations experts, making sure no image of Ethan looking vulnerable would ever reach the public. A polished black SUV pulled up, the kind of vehicle designed to withstand everything from paparazzi to more violent threats, and Ethan gestured for Lily to step inside. "You are a witness now," he said quietly, his tone leaving no room for refusal. "And you are not safe here." The city lights streaked across the tinted windows as the SUV slipped into traffic, leaving the chaos behind. Lily sat in silence, her hands trembling in her lap. She had wanted nothing more than to finish her shift, collect her modest tips, and return to the tiny apartment where her 19-year-old sister Hannah was probably waiting with textbooks spread across their worn kitchen table. Instead, she was in the back seat of a billionaire's armored car, her life suddenly tied to a story that would dominate headlines by morning. She closed her eyes and saw the bubbles in the wine glass, the guilty flicker of the waiter's eyes, the weight of her own whispered words. "Don't drink this." It replayed over and over, both terrifying and strangely intimate. Sophia turned her attention to Lily, her expression unreadable. "Name," she said. "Lily Anderson," she managed. "Age, 26. Sophia's pen scratched notes into a small leather notebook. She was not asking out of curiosity, but necessity, documenting everything for Ethan's defense team, creating a record that could be used in court or negotiations. Education, Sophia pressed. 2 years of behavioral psychology at Northwestern. I dropped out when my mother got sick. Employment history, restaurants, diner in Evanston, catering then. Skyline for the past 3 years. Sophia's sharp eyes studied her, as if weighing the usefulness of each detail. Family. Lily swallowed hard. Just my younger sister Hannah. 19, college freshman. I support us. She did not mention the debts, the endless medical bills left from her mother's cancer treatments. The late nights spent worrying if she could stretch tips into rent and groceries. Those were not details this elegant woman needed to know. But Ethan's gaze flicked toward her at that answer, and for the briefest moment, something softened in his expression. He knew the weight of family responsibility. He knew the toll of loss. Yet he said nothing, only leaned back in his seat with that unreadable calm that made him both fascinating and frightening. While Lily tried to process the surreal turn her life had taken, Ethan's phone buzzed. He answered with a single word, listened, then replied in clipped commands. His voice was low, steady, controlled. It was the voice of someone accustomed to steering crises rather than being consumed by them. When he ended the call, Sophia leaned forward. "The media has the story. We have 30 minutes before it breaks nationally. Legal is drafting a statement. PR will emphasize attempted sabotage by competitors. No mention of the witness until we decide if it benefits us." Lily blinked. "The witness you, Sophia," said without a hint of warmth. "You saw it, you spoke, you stopped it." The SUV slowed as it entered a private underground garage beneath one of Ethan's downtown properties. Security scanners beeped, steel doors closed behind them, and Lily felt as though the city outside had been cut off entirely. When the car doors opened, she was ushered into a sleek lobby with marble walls and a security desk manned by 2 imposing guards. Everything gleamed with precision and wealth. For the first time, she realized she was no longer part of the ordinary world. She had stepped into Ethan Cross's fortress, and whether she liked it or not, she was now a piece in his game. Ethan finally addressed her directly. "You noticed what no one else did. You saw details my own team missed. Why?" Lily hesitated, then found her voice. Because I was trained to notice micro-expressions, behavioral cues. It was part of my degree before I had to drop out. That man who poured the glass, he looked guilty. He was waiting for you to drink. I just knew. His eyes narrowed slightly, measuring her words, testing for deception. When he found none, he leaned closer. That instinct saved my life tonight, which means you are not just a witness. You are a liability to whoever sent him. Lily's pulse spiked. A liability. They will want to silence you, he said calmly, as if discussing tomorrow's stock market. So until I know who tried to poison me, you will not return to your apartment. You will not speak to anyone outside my circle for your safety. The weight of his words sank like lead. Hannah. Her sister was waiting at home, unaware of any of this. Panic rose in Lily's chest. I need to call my sister. She'll worry if I do not come home. Ethan's gaze remained steady. You will call her. From one of our secure lines. She will believe you are staying overnight with a coworker. Nothing more. Do you understand? His control was absolute, his authority undeniable, and yet beneath it, Lily sensed something unexpected. Concern. He was not just protecting himself. He was protecting her too, even if his methods felt suffocating. Outside the fortress of cross dynamics, the world was already spinning with speculation. Journalists drafting theories about corporate rivals, investors watching stock tickers with nervous eyes. Inside, in the silence of polished marble and glass, Lily Anderson realized her life had just been rewritten. She was no longer simply a waitress struggling to survive. She was the woman who had whispered the words that saved Ethan Cross, and that single act had thrust her into a dangerous new orbit she could neither escape nor fully comprehend. The limousine glided through Chicago's midnight streets, with the smoothness of a predator moving through its own territory, insulated from the chaos outside by tinted glass and the hum of an engine tuned to perfection. Lily sat rigid in her seat, her black apron still tied around her waist, her hair pulled back into the work bun she had twisted hours earlier. Those stray strands now framed her face. Across from her, Ethan Cross reclined in measured calm, one hand resting on his knee, the other lightly holding a glass of untouched water that Sophia had pressed into his hand before they departed. His storm-gray eyes watched her steadily, as though she were a puzzle he intended to solve. "Why did you know," he asked at last, his voice low and unhurried, "that the wine was poisoned when none of my men noticed?" The question was direct, but not accusatory, and it pierced through the silence like the sharp edge of a blade. Lily swallowed her throat dry and forced herself to meet his gaze. "Because I noticed the details, the bubbles, the darker shade of red. And I saw the way the server kept glancing at you, the tension in his jaw, the way he held his breath. When you reached for the glass, I studied behavioral psychology. I never finished my degree, but I know microexpressions. People reveal more than they think." For a moment, his expression did not change. Then the corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not a smile, but an acknowledgement. "Micro-expressions," he repeated softly as if tasting the words. "Interesting. You whispered just 3 words, and it altered everything. Don't drink this. You realize you saved my life tonight with a whisper." The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. Because it was not gratitude, it was fascination, as if the act itself intrigued him as much as the fact she had acted at all. She clasped her hands together, tightly, trying to stop their trembling. "I only did what anyone would have done," she said, though even as the words left her lips, she knew they were not true. Most people would not have noticed. Most people would have stayed silent, convincing themselves they imagined it. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his eyes intent. "No, most people look away from danger. You leaned in, you whispered. That makes you very different, Miss Anderson." He spoke her name as though he had known it all along, and she wondered uneasily if Sophia had already briefed him, or if he simply had ways of knowing details about every person who ever crossed his orbit. The city lights flickered across his features, accentuating the hard lines of his jaw. The calm control etched into every movement. He radiated authority, but there was something else beneath it too. Something she had glimpsed when he set the poisoned glass down at her warning. Vulnerability. For a brief second he had trusted her without hesitation. That trust lingered in the air between them, now fragile and strange. "I should be afraid of you," Lily murmured almost to herself, surprising even her own ears. His brows arched slightly. "Why? Because you are Ethan Cross. Because people who move in your world do not get poisoned by accident. And because if someone is willing to risk killing you in public, then anyone near you is in danger." Her voice cracked on the last word, the thought of her sister Hannah flashing in her mind. Ethan considered her quietly, then said, "You should be afraid of them, not me. You are alive because you trusted your instincts. That whisper, it changes things." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication, as the car slowed beneath the awning of his private tower. Outside, men in suits moved with quiet precision, opening doors, scanning shadows, making sure their world remained untouchable. Lily clutched her apron, torn between terror and an odd pull she could not explain. She should feel like a prisoner being carried off by a king who ruled through intimidation. Yet when she replayed the moment at the table, what she felt most was the intimacy of leaning close, of his eyes meeting hers, of him listening to her whisper as if it mattered more than the noise of an entire room. She had spoken 3 words that had bridged the impossible distance between Billionaire and Waitress, and now he looked at her as though she was no longer invisible. The door opened and the chill night air swept in, carrying the scent of rain and city steel. Ethan gestured for her to step out, first his voice calm but commanding. "Stay with me tonight. It is the only way to keep you safe until we know more." She hesitated on the threshold, her heart pounding, but something inside whispered back the same phrase she had given him. "Don't drink this. Instinct, survival, and perhaps something more." She stepped out into his world, knowing the whisper that had saved him was already binding her fate to his. The tower rose above the Chicago skyline like a monument to ambition, its glass walls reflecting the restless city below. Lily had never stepped inside a building like this before. The marble lobby stretched upward with ceilings so high it felt like walking into a cathedral built not for worship but for power. Security officers in tailored suits stood like statues at every corner, earpieces tucked discreetly against their skin eyes scanning without pause. The limousine rolled into a private underground entrance, where steel gates closed behind them with a hiss sealing off the outside world. Ethan Cross stepped out first, his presence commanding even without a word. He extended his hand not out of courtesy, but as though it were a directive, and Lily obeyed, her fingers brushing his as she followed him into the fortress he called home. The elevator ride was silent, broken only by the hum of machinery as the car carried them upward at impossible speed. Floor numbers flickered past, then disappeared entirely as they soared beyond what most residents of the city would ever see. Lily stood in the corner, clutching her bag, acutely aware of the contrast between her wrinkled black uniform and Ethan's immaculate suit. Her reflection in the mirrored walls reminded her of who she was, a waitress unremarkable, replaceable. Yet somehow she had been pulled into the orbit of a man whose decisions shifted stock markets. The doors opened to reveal a world that felt more like a modern palace than an apartment. The penthouse stretched across the top 2 floors of the tower walls of glass, revealing the sprawl of Chicago glittering like a sea of stars. The interior was all sleek lines, polished stone, and minimalist design art pieces that Lily recognized from magazines displayed with casual wealth. The air smelled faintly of leather and cedar, expensive and masculine. Ethan moved with ease through the space, discarding his jacket across the back of a leather sofa, as though the fortress existed entirely to serve him. Lily followed hesitantly, feeling as though her footsteps might leave marks where they did not belong. From the far side of the room, a woman approached, tall and elegant, her black hair pulled into a precise bun, her charcoal dress immaculate. Sophia Delgado, whom Lily had glimpsed earlier now, introduced herself with the crisp efficiency of someone accustomed to running an empire behind the scenes. "Mr. Cross," she said, her voice, even the press is circling. "But we have contained the initial leak. Legal has framed the event as an attempted sabotage against Cross Dynamics. No mention of the witness yet. We recommend keeping her identity classified until we know whether the attacker was acting alone." Sophia's eyes flicked toward Lily, assessing her with the same scrutiny she might give a hostile negotiator. Lily straightened instinctively, fighting the urge to shrink under that gaze. Ethan simply nodded, his expression unchanged, then gestured toward Lily. "She stays here," he said. The statement was not up for debate. Sophia inclined her head slightly, though her eyes revealed the faintest glimmer of surprise. "Of course." She turned to Lily. "Your room is prepared. Clothes will be brought. If you require anything, you will inform me." The words were polite, but the tone left no doubt this was not a home, it was a fortress, and Lily was not a guest, but a protected asset. As Sophia disappeared down a hallway, Ethan turned back to Lily. "Do you understand why you cannot leave yet?" Lily wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the city lights beyond the glass. "Because I saw something I was not supposed to see. Because whoever did this will not stop with one attempt." Ethan stepped closer, his presence filling the space. "Because you whispered, and it changed the outcome. That makes you valuable, and it makes you a target." Lily shivered, her thoughts spinning back to Hannah alone in their small apartment, unaware of the danger that now reached beyond Ethan to anyone connected to him. "I need to call my sister," she said, her voice breaking, despite her effort to keep it steady. Ethan studied her for a long moment, then pressed a button on the sleek black console by the sofa. A second later, a secure phone line lit up. "You may call her from here. Nothing untraceable leaves this penthouse." Lily dialed quickly, her hands trembling. When Hannah's sleepy voice answered, Lily forced her tone into casual cheer. She lied, saying she was staying overnight with a coworker to cover a late shift. She promised she would be home soon. She hung up before the tears could give her away. Ethan watched her silently, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he spoke again. "You think you saved me tonight, but in truth you saved yourself. If I had taken that sip, this city would already be on fire with speculation. Stockholders pulling their investments, rivals circling like vultures. The person who sent that poison would have succeeded not only in killing me, but in crippling everything I have built. Do you understand why I cannot allow this to happen again?" Lily met his gaze, her chest tight. "You live in a world where people use poison in wine glasses. I live in a world where I work double shifts to keep my sister in school. Our worlds were never supposed to touch." Ethan's voice lowered almost a murmur. "And yet they did, and now neither of us can pretend otherwise." His words left her unsettled, the intimacy of the truth almost more dangerous than the poison itself. Sophia returned with a slim folder, which she handed to Ethan. "Preliminary reports. We suspect Marcus Hale. He has the resources and the merger gives him motive." Ethan flipped through the pages, his jaw tightening. He said nothing, but the air grew heavier, as though his silence carried more weight than an outburst ever could. Lily stood still, the realization dug like ice. This was not random. This was deliberate. A corporate war fought not only in boardrooms, but in shadows where poison replaced contracts and silence replaced signatures. She had stepped into the heart of it, unprepared, uninvited, yet irrevocably involved. Ethan set the folder down and turned back to her. "You wanted to know what kind of world I live in. Now you know. You are inside the fortress, and once inside, there is no leaving unchanged." The truth in his voice left her trembling. She had thought she was a waitress serving wine to the wealthy. Tonight she had become part of a billionaire's fortress, where whispers carried more power than gunfire, and survival demanded vigilance, sharper than any blade. The night stretched deep and quiet inside the penthouse, the city below glowing like a restless constellation of ambition, greed, and dreams. Lily found herself standing before the towering glass windows, her reflection mingling with the view of Chicago, while behind her the echo of footsteps moved with deliberate calm. Ethan Cross had removed his tie and unbuttoned the collar of his shirt, a rare concession to relaxation. Though even stripped of formality, he carried an aura of authority that could never be undone. The silence between them was thick, filled with questions Lily wanted to ask, but dared not. It was Ethan who finally spoke, his voice, lower than usual, steady, but carrying an undercurrent she had not heard before. "Do you know what it means to build an empire, Miss Anderson?" He did not wait for her answer. He poured himself a glass of untouched whiskey, but instead of drinking it, he swirled it in his hand, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "It means sacrifice. It means burying weakness before anyone can smell blood. It means living every day with the knowledge that one mistake can invite wolves to your door." He turned, then his eyes locking on hers. "My mother taught me that lesson when I was too young to understand it. She died because she trusted people she should not have." The admission hung heavy in the air. It was not the polished script of a CEO, but the raw voice of a son, carrying scars he could not hide. Lily stepped closer. Without thinking, her breath caught in her throat. How did she die? For a moment his jaw tightened as if he might refuse. But then he said she was betrayed. Not with poison in a glass, but with lies whispered in boardrooms. She believed people who promised loyalty, and when the deal collapsed, she was left ruined, shamed, and sick. "I was 17 when I held her hand for the last time." His eyes shifted back to the city, and Lily saw something she had never expected, the weight of grief behind the steel. She felt her own chest tighten, memories of hospital rooms flooding back. My mother, too, she whispered, her voice breaking. Cancer. It took everything we had. The bills piled up until I had to drop out of school just to keep my sister fed. Sometimes I still hear her voice when I close my eyes, telling me not to give up. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and suddenly the space between Billionaire and Waitress felt smaller, bridged by pain neither had chosen. Ethan turned back toward her, studying her face, as though seeing her for the first time not as an accidental witness, but as someone who carried shadows like his own. He set the glass down untouched and stepped closer. Grief is the most ruthless teacher. It strips you down until only truth remains. She held his gaze steady, despite the tremor in her hands. Maybe it just teaches us how much we can endure. For the first time, his lips curved not into the cold smirk of calculated charm, but into something gentler, almost vulnerable. Perhaps you are right. The moment stretched, charged with unspoken energy. Lily's heart raced, torn between fear of what proximity to him meant and the inexplicable pull that drew her closer. She looked away, her eyes catching on the sleek, black piano positioned near the window. "Do you play?" she asked, her voice soft, but eager to break the tension. Ethan followed her gaze. Sometimes, when silence becomes too heavy. Without another word, he moved toward the piano and sat, his fingers resting on the keys before pressing them lightly. A melody filled the air, low and haunting notes that seemed to echo the pain he had just confessed. Lily sank into the nearby chair, her body relaxing for the first time since the night began, letting the music wash over her. She closed her eyes and imagined the boy. He must have been grieving his mother, channeling the ache into sound when words would not come. When the final note lingered in the air, Ethan's gaze lifted to hers again, and this time his voice was barely above a whisper. Sometimes silence saves more than words ever could. The phrase carried more weight than its simplicity suggested, and Lily felt the tremor of recognition. This was the second whisper between them, not born of danger, but of intimacy, a fragile bridge where he allowed her to see the man beneath the armor. The city outside seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them suspended in that quiet confession. Lily stood slowly and approached the piano, her hand resting on the glossy surface. "You hide it well," she said softly. "The grief, the loneliness." Ethan's fingers hovered above the keys. "I hide because the world does not forgive weakness. But you saw it in a single night. That makes you dangerous, Lily." His use of her first name startled her, sending heat rushing to her cheeks. "Dangerous," she repeated. "Because I noticed, because you whispered and I listened." He said, his voice steady but laced with something deeper. "And because I cannot ignore that." She felt the distance between them collapse as she stood beside him, her breath mingling with his. For a heartbeat, the penthouse felt less like a fortress and more like a sanctuary carved out of pain and defiance. She wanted to pull away, to remember the world waiting outside, but instead she leaned closer, drawn to the rawness in his eyes. The kiss that followed was inevitable, slow at first, then deepening with a hunger neither of them could disguise. It was not the reckless passion of strangers, but the collision of two people who recognized in each other the same broken edges, the same need for connection that whispered louder than any logic. When they parted, Lily's chest rose and fell, with sharp breaths, her mind spinning with the reality of what had just happened. Ethan touched her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin with surprising tenderness. "This changes everything," he said quietly. She searched his face for answers, for reassurance, but found only the truth that nothing could go back to the way it was. She had saved him with a whisper, and now he had let her into the silence he had never shared with anyone else. Their worlds had collided, not just through danger, but through vulnerability, and beneath the glittering skyline of Chicago, Lily realized she was no longer just surviving in the shadows. She was standing in the light of a man whose power could destroy her or save her, and she did not know which terrified her more. The days that followed blurred together in a rhythm of heightened security, discreet phone calls, and hushed strategy sessions inside Ethan's penthouse. Lily found herself existing in a strange limbo between guest and prisoner, allowed freedom within the glass fortress, but constantly shadowed by the silent presence of guards who never let her out of their sight. The media frenzy outside had only grown speculation swirling about enemies of cross dynamics and whispers of sabotage by rival companies. Yet through the storm, Ethan remained unshaken, orchestrating responses with the precision of a chess master. To the world, he was untouchable. But inside the fortress, shadows lurked. One evening, Sofia Delgado entered the living room, carrying a slim folder, her expression unreadable. She laid it on the table before Ethan with the calm efficiency of someone delivering a verdict. "We traced the compromised bottle back to the wine cellar," she said. "Inventory records show it was handled by a member of the staff named Jimmy Torres. He's worked at Skyline 52 for 2 years, no criminal record, but financial strain, debts, and a sudden influx of cash deposited last week." The name struck Lily like a blow. "Jimmy." She whispered, her throat tightening. She remembered him vividly, a fellow server who had once been her friend. They had shared exhausted laughs in the break room, compared bruises from carrying heavy trays, and confided about overdue bills. He had been kind once or so, she believed. Now the truth twisted in her chest. "No," she said, shaking her head. "He wouldn't. He's desperate, yes, but not murderous." Ethan's gaze fixed on her with that piercing intensity she had come to dread. Desperation makes people pliable. Whoever wanted me dead needed someone on the inside. Jimmy was the weak link. Lily's heart pounded. She wanted to argue, to defend the boy who once walked her home after late shifts, but the evidence lay open on the table: deposits from an unknown shell company, messages deleted from his phone, and witness statements placing him near the poisoned bottle. Ethan's voice hardened. "He betrayed you as much as he betrayed me. Do you understand that? If you had not warned me, you would be dead too. Poison does not discriminate." The words cut deep, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Still, Lily could not reconcile the image of Jimmy with the idea of attempted murder. Her voice rose, trembling with anger. "So what then? You destroy him. You crush what is left of his life, because that is what billionaires do." Ethan leaned forward, his gray eyes storming. "I protect what is mine. He made a choice, and now he will face the consequences." "You mean you will ruin him?" she shot back. "Blacklisted, unemployable, branded for life. You'll erase him with a phone call, and you would prefer I let him walk free, paid to try again. How many more must die before your compassion ends?" His voice was not loud, but it struck with force, each word sharp as glass. Lily felt tears burn at the corners of her eyes. She hated the logic in his argument, hated the cold arithmetic of survival in his world. Yet something inside her rebelled. "There has to be another way," she whispered. Ethan's jaw clenched the muscles taut with restraint. For a moment he looked less like a titan of industry and more like the boy who had lost his mother to betrayal. Someone who believed mercy was a luxury he could not afford. But the vulnerability flickered and was gone, replaced by the unyielding mask of the billionaire. "Mercy is weakness," he said, "and weakness invites death." The words broke something in her. Without another word, Lily spun away, grabbing her coat from the back of the sofa. "I cannot be part of this," she said, her voice raw. "I cannot stand by and watch you destroy someone I once called a friend." Ethan rose, his figure towering, but he did not stop her. His silence was heavier than any argument, an acknowledgement that her moral compass pointed in a direction his world no longer recognized. Lily stormed out of the penthouse past startled guards and into the waiting elevator. Her reflection stared back at her in the mirrored walls, eyes wet with fury and grief. For the first time since that night in Skyline 52, she felt the full weight of what it meant to be entangled with Ethan Cross. He was not just the man she had kissed beside the piano. He was a force who bent the world to his will, and compassion was a currency he could not spend. When the elevator doors opened onto the private lobby below, she stepped into the cold night air, her heart aching. She needed space, she needed to breathe, she needed to remember who she was before a whisper tied her fate to his. Above her, the lights of the tower glowed like a watchful eye, a reminder that no one ever truly left Ethan Cross's fortress unchanged. The night air outside the fortress was sharp, carrying the scent of rain-soaked concrete and the distant roar of the city. But for Lily, it was the first breath of freedom she had felt since Ethan Cross's world swallowed her whole. She walked quickly down the sidewalk, coat pulled tight around her shoulders, ignoring the shadow of one of his men who discreetly followed at a distance. She needed to get away from his suffocating logic, from the cruel certainty in his voice when he condemned Jimmy as if people were pieces to be discarded. Her anger simmered, but beneath it lay something more dangerous, a tremor of fear that maybe he was right. Maybe compassion was weakness in a world where power was currency and betrayal was inevitable. She pushed the thought aside and focused on the only thing that mattered: Hannah. Her little sister was the one piece of her life, untouched by poison and ambition, a bright light who studied, hard dreamed big, and believed the world still held goodness. Lily texted her on the way home, asking if she was safe, if she was in the apartment, and when no answer came, the unease began to spread through her like frost. By the time she reached their building on the edge of Lincoln Park, her chest felt tight. The apartment door was unlocked. She stepped inside and froze. Hannah's textbooks were scattered across the table, her backpack still on the chair, a half-drunk glass of water on the counter. But the apartment was silent, too silent. On the kitchen counter lay a single envelope with her name written in sharp block letters. Lily's hands shook as she tore it open. Inside was a single note. If Cross wants her back, he will walk away from the merger. Midnight tomorrow, no police. Her breath caught in her throat. The world tilted. Hannah was gone. She sank into the chair, the paper trembling in her fingers, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes told her. Her sister, the only family she had left, had been taken as collateral in a war she barely understood. She reached for her phone with trembling hands and dialed Ethan's number. Her pride forgotten, her anger drowned by panic. He answered on the first ring, his voice low and steady. "Lily." "They took her," she choked out. "They took Hannah. They left a note. They want you to drop the merger. Midnight tomorrow." Silence followed, heavy and measured. Then Ethan's voice cut through sharp as steel. "Stay where you are. My team is on their way." "No," she cried. "You cannot treat this like a deal. This is my sister. She has nothing to do with your empire." His voice hardened. "They took her because of me. That makes it my responsibility. And I do not lose what is mine." Minutes later, his security detail swept into the apartment, scanning the rooms, collecting the note, and speaking into radios with coded phrases. Ethan arrived soon after, tall and unshaken, though his eyes burned with an intensity she had never seen before. He crouched in front of her, his hand steady on her arm. "Listen to me, Lily. We will get her back." How she demanded, her tears spilling. "They said no police. They will kill her," if he interrupted firmly. "Not police, but I have other resources." Within hours, the apartment was transformed into a command post, screens lit up with maps, phone records, surveillance feeds. Ethan had called in a team of private contractors men with military precision who moved with quiet authority. A former intelligence analyst joined via secure video tracing digital footprints. Sofia Delgado stood at Ethan's side, coordinating every piece with relentless efficiency. Lily watched in stunned disbelief as the empire she had glimpsed only in whispers now revealed itself in full force. This was not mafia violence, not reckless bravado. This was corporate warfare, fought with data, money, and influence, and yet it was no less dangerous. At dawn, one of the analysts traced a signal from Hannah's phone, briefly activated before going dark again. It pinged near an abandoned warehouse, on the outskirts of the city, a place often used for storage by shipping companies, but recently purchased through a shell corporation linked back to Marcus Hale, Ethan's rival in the merger. The name sent a chill through the room. Marcus Hale, a man known for ruthless takeovers and a smile that never reached his eyes. Ethan's jaw tightened as he studied the file on the screen. "He escalated," Ethan said quietly. "First poison, now kidnapping. He wants leverage. He thinks I will bend." He turned to Lily. "I will not bend, and I will not let him keep your sister." Lily's breath came fast. "Then take me with you. She will be terrified. She will need to see me." Ethan's eyes narrowed. It is not safe. She is my sister, Lily," insisted her voice trembling but fierce. "If you leave me behind, I will find her myself." For a moment, the fortress walls of his control cracked, revealing the frustration of a man who rarely heard the word no. Then slowly he nodded. "You will come, but you will stay with me. You will not leave my side." The plan unfolded with precision. The team would infiltrate the warehouse, at nightfall disable guards, and extract Hannah. Lily listened as they spoke of contingencies and escape routes, her heart pounding with every detail. This was not her world yet. She was bound to it now, by blood and by the whisper that had changed everything. When the time came, dressed in borrowed black clothing that made her feel like an imposter in a spy movie, Lily climbed into the back of another armored vehicle beside Ethan. His hand brushed hers briefly, steadying her trembling fingers. "You are stronger than you think," he said softly. And for once his words carried no calculation, only conviction. As the convoy sped toward the warehouse, Lily's mind clung to a single truth. She had entered Ethan Cross's world by accident, but now her sister's life depended on him. And for all her fear, for all her doubt, she found herself believing him when he said they would bring Hannah home. The convoy rolled through the industrial outskirts of Chicago, beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds, headlights cutting through the shadows as warehouses loomed like silent giants. Lily sat in the back of the armored SUV, her palms pressed together so tightly, her knuckles whitened, every nerve stretched taut. Beside her, Ethan Cross radiated an unshakable calm. His gaze locked on the tablet screen Sophia held, where satellite images and security camera feeds marked the warehouse where Hannah was being kept. The team moved with ruthless efficiency. Ex-military contractors clad in dark gear, their voices clipped and precise, as they outlined entry points and fallback positions. This was not the reckless chaos Lily had always associated with danger, but a calculated operation. Every step measured, every risk accounted for. Yet her heart pounded with terror because Hannah was inside her baby sister, who had never hurt anyone, who still believed the world could be kind. The vehicles stopped a block away, engines dimmed, lights killed. The team dispersed into the shadows like wraiths surrounding the warehouse. Ethan turned to Lily, his voice low but steady. "You stay with me. No matter what happens, you do not move away from me." She nodded, though fear trembled through her bones. The two of them followed the strike team along a side wall, where rusted steel panels had been pried open, just enough to allow entry. Inside, the air smelled of oil and damp concrete, the darkness broken only by thin shafts of moonlight cutting through dirty windows high above. Lily's breath caught as she heard a muffled cry from deeper inside, a sound she would have known anywhere. Hannah. She pressed forward instinctively, but Ethan's hand closed around her wrist, firm but protective. He shook his head and guided her silently through the gloom. The team neutralized guards one by one with swift precision. No gunfire, only the quiet thuds of bodies, subdued duct tape pulled across mouths. Every movement was controlled, professional, efficient. Lily's fear shifted into awe as she realized this was the power Ethan commanded, not through violence for its own sake, but through calculated force. They reached the inner chamber, where a single lamp illuminated the scene. Hannah sat bound to a chair, her face, pale eyes wide with terror but alive. Standing a few feet away was Marcus Hale, flanked by two bodyguards. Marcus was everything Ethan was not: flashy, arrogant. His tailored suit screaming excess rather than subtle power. His smile curved as he saw Ethan step into the light. Cross, he drawled, his voice oily. "I wondered how long it would take for you to come. I assume you got my message." Ethan's voice was cold steel. "Release her." Marcus chuckled, circling the chair as if Hannah were merely a bargaining chip on a game board. "You know the terms? Walk away from the merger, or this sweet girl becomes collateral damage. Poison didn't work, but perhaps a little leverage will." Lily's stomach twisted as Hannah whimpered her eyes, searching frantically until they landed on her. "Lily," she sobbed, muffled by the gag. Lily surged forward, but Ethan held her back. With an arm across her chest, his presence was a wall of protection, even as fury simmered beneath his calm exterior. Marcus's grin widened. "You see, Ethan, you may control your empire, but you cannot control everyone. Money buys loyalty, and I bought hers." He gestured to Hannah with sickening ease. Ethan's eyes darkened. "You are finished, Marcus. This ends tonight." With a nod, almost imperceptible, Ethan signaled his team. In an instant, the warehouse erupted into motion. The contractors surged forward, disarming Marcus's guards before they could react, securing weapons, pinning them to the ground. Marcus staggered back, shock flashing across his face. As his smug composure crumbled, Lily tore free of Ethan's grip and rushed to Hannah, pulling the gag from her mouth, cutting the ropes with trembling hands. "I'm here, I've got you," she whispered fiercely, tears streaming down her face. Hannah clung to her sobbing, and for a moment the world shrank to the warmth of her sister's embrace. But behind them, Ethan advanced toward Marcus, his expression carved from stone. Marcus spat in defiance. "You think this changes anything? The boardrooms will still fight you. The regulators will still tear you apart. You can't prove I had anything to do with Ethan cut him off by tossing a folder onto the floor at his feet." Papers spilled across the concrete photographs, bank transfers, confidential memos. Marcus's eyes widened as he recognized them. "You bastard," he hissed. Ethan's voice was quiet but lethal. "Every payment you authorized, every shell company you used, every message tying you to the poisoning and the kidnapping. It's all here. My lawyers already sent copies to the FBI. By morning, your empire will collapse under the weight of your own corruption." Marcus lunged forward, rage overtaking him, but two contractors restrained him effortlessly, forcing him to his knees. The arrogance drained from his face, leaving only fear. Ethan looked down at him with an expression that was neither triumphant nor cruel, only resolute. "You thought I would trade lives for business. You underestimated me, and you underestimated her." He glanced toward Lily, still holding Hannah close, and something unspoken passed between them. It was not just gratitude, but recognition that she had become part of the battle in ways neither of them could deny. Police sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. Ethan's team moved with efficiency, preparing for extraction. "Time to go," Sophia said sharply, reappearing at Ethan's side with her tablet in hand. "The authorities will take it from here. We've done enough." Ethan nodded, then crossed the space to Lily. She looked up at him with tear-streaked cheeks, her arms wrapped around Hannah. "Is it over?" she whispered. His gaze softened for the first time that night. "For you, yes. For him, not yet. But you are safe now." Relief washed over her, in waves, yet beneath it lay something deeper, a current that tied her fate to his. As they hurried from the warehouse into the cool night, Ethan's hand never left her back steady and protective. Hannah clung to her sister, but her eyes darted toward Ethan with a mixture of fear and awe, sensing the power he wielded so effortlessly. When they reached the waiting vehicles, Lily turned to Ethan, her voice trembling. "You could have killed him, but you didn't." Ethan met her gaze, the storm in his eyes quiet for the first time. "Death is easy, ruin is permanent. Marcus will live to see everything he built crumble." It was then Lily understood the true scope of his power. He did not need bullets. He had truth law and influence sharpened into weapons far deadlier than violence. The ride back to the city was quiet exhaustion settling over them all. Hannah slept with her head in Lily's lap, her breathing uneven but steady. Lily stroked her hair, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline. Across from her, Ethan sat in silence, his hand resting on his knee, his gaze not on the city outside, but on her. She felt the weight of that gaze and knew that everything had changed. The poison in the wine glass, the whisper that saved him, the kidnapping that forced them together. It had all led to this moment, where danger and trust had intertwined so tightly that walking away would be impossible. As the convoy crossed back into the glittering skyline, lightning split the horizon, illuminating the fortress of glass that awaited them. Lily held her sister close, but her eyes remained locked on Ethan. In his silence, she heard a whisper louder than words, a promise that this bond forged in peril was only the beginning. The storm that had threatened the city finally broke by the time they returned to Ethan's tower, rain lashing against the glass walls of the penthouse. In heavy sheets, thunder rolling like a drumbeat of release after the relentless tension. Lily sat curled on the sofa, with Hannah still clinging to her, the younger girl trembling despite the warmth of the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. For the first time since the ordeal began, Lily allowed herself to breathe, though each breath carried the ache of exhaustion and the raw edge of everything they had endured. Ethan stood by the window, his tall frame cast in silhouette against the flashes of lightning, his suit damp from the night, but his presence no less commanding. He had said little since the warehouse leaving Sophia and the team to finalize reports and secure Hannah's safety. But now the silence between them felt different, heavier, as though he were struggling with words he had never allowed himself to speak. When Hannah finally drifted into uneasy sleep, Lily eased her onto the cushions and stood crossing the room to him. Her steps were quiet, but he seemed to sense her presence, turning slightly, so his storm-gray eyes found hers in the dim light. They stared at each other for a long moment, the noise of the storm fading into the background, until only the pulse of connection remained. "You saved her, Lily," whispered her voice, thick with gratitude. "You brought her back to me." Ethan's jaw tightened his gaze, lowering briefly before returning to hers. "I could not let her be taken, not after what you did for me, not after that night when you whispered and changed everything." The memory of Skyline 52 came rushing back. The poisoned wine, the urgency in her voice, the way he had trusted her without hesitation. That whisper had bound them together, and now it echoed between them, carrying a meaning that went far beyond survival. Lily stepped closer, her chest rising and falling with unsteady breaths. "You talk about me saving you," she said softly, "but you saved me too. You pulled me into your world when I wanted to run, and somehow you kept me alive when everything felt impossible. I do not know how to make sense of it, Ethan. You terrify me, and yet Her voice faltered, but the truth burned in her eyes. "And yet you cannot walk away," he finished for her, his tone low, almost tender. "Nor can I." His hand lifted, hesitating for the first time she had ever seen, as though afraid of breaking something fragile. Then his fingers brushed her cheek, trailing softly against her damp skin. The touch was not the command of a man used to control, but the confession of someone who had forgotten how to be gentle. "You whispered once and saved my life," he said, his voice dropping to a near murmur. "Let me whisper now and give you mine." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear, and whispered words she had not expected. "You whispered and saved me once. Now let me whisper, only to you for life." The intimacy of the vow shivered through her, dissolving the last of her defenses. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his promise, the sincerity that trembled beneath his steel exterior. When their lips met, it was not with the urgency of fear, but with the inevitability of truth. A kiss that spoke of loss and redemption of pain, transformed into hope. The storm outside raged, but inside the fortress, there was only the two of them entwined in the quiet power of love. Spoken not with grand declarations, but with whispers meant for no one else. When they parted, Lily's hands rested against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath the damp fabric of his shirt. "Ethan," she breathed, "I do not know how this ends, but I know I am not afraid anymore." He pressed his forehead gently against hers, his eyes closed. "Neither am I. For the first time in years, I am not afraid." They stood that way for what felt like forever. Two souls scarred by betrayal and grief, yet bound by a whisper of love stronger than the storms that surrounded them. Hannah stirred in her sleep, reminding Lily of the reality still waiting outside the fragile bubble of the moment. But when Ethan drew back his hand, still cradling her face, she knew something had shifted forever. He had let her see the man behind the empire, the one who carried scars no wealth could heal, and in turn, he had seen her strength born from loss and survival. No contracts, no mergers, no power plays could touch what had been spoken between them tonight. Their love whispered into existence was both fragile and unbreakable. And as the storm began to ease and dawn threatened on the horizon, Lily Anderson realized she no longer belonged solely to the world she had come from. She belonged here, too, in the fortress of a man who had once seemed untouchable, a man who had whispered her into his life and into his heart. 1 year later, the Chicago skyline shimmered beneath the spring night sky, as the ballroom of the Cross Foundation Gala filled with the hum of laughter and music and the clink of crystal glasses raised in toasts. The event was the kind of spectacle that dominated headlines, a gathering of politicians, celebrities, and business titans, all eager to be seen beside Ethan Cross the billionaire, who had not only survived an attempted assassination, but emerged stronger, his empire expanding across continents with surgical precision. Yet what captured more attention than the dazzling chandeliers or the silent auctions was the woman at his side, Lily Anderson, no longer the anonymous waitress of Skyline 52, but the head of behavioral insights at Cross Dynamics, a position invented for her, yet one she had transformed into a cornerstone of strategy. She stood radiant in a gown of midnight silk that flowed like water, her hair swept into soft waves, her eyes alight with both poise and quiet pride. The whispers in the crowd no longer questioned who she was, but acknowledged her as an equal, the woman who had become the confidant, the partner, and soon the wife of one of America's most enigmatic billionaires. As the evening unfolded, Lily moved effortlessly among senators, investors, and tech pioneers, her insights weaving through conversations that once would have intimidated her. She spoke of human behavior, of reading subtle cues, in negotiations of how empathy could be leveraged, not as weakness, but as a strategic advantage. Ethan watched her with the steady calm of a man who had found his anchor, his hand, resting lightly at the small of her back, a touch that was protective yet proud. Hannah was there too, seated near the stage, glowing with the excitement of a freshman scholarship student, the product of the Cross Foundation's commitment to education. No longer the frightened girl kidnapped in a warehouse, she now thrived under Lily's care and Ethan's silent guardianship. The family they had built was unconventional but unshakable. When the speeches began, Ethan took the stage, tall, composed, dressed in a black tuxedo, cut with military precision, he exuded authority that silenced the room. Yet when he spoke, his voice carried warmth that surprised even the most cynical of his rivals. He thanked donors, praised initiatives, and spoke of a future where power meant responsibility. Then he turned slightly, his gaze finding Lily in the crowd. For a moment the room seemed to dissolve, until it was only the two of them as it had been on that night when everything changed. That night at Skyline 52, Ethan said, his voice carrying easily across the hall, a whisper saved my life, a quiet warning that cut through the noise and the danger. Tonight, I stand here alive because of it, but more importantly, I stand here a better man because of her. Gasps rippled through the audience, curiosity sharpened into awe as Ethan descended from the podium and crossed the stage to where Lily stood, frozen in surprise. The cameras flashed, the press leaned forward, but he saw only her. He reached for her hand, bringing her onto the stage beside him. With the eyes of the world upon them, he lowered his head so only she could hear, and whispered words meant for her alone. That night you whispered to save me. Tonight I whisper to promise you forever. The world held its breath as he knelt, producing a velvet box from his pocket. Inside a diamond ring caught the light of 1,000 cameras' brilliance, reflecting the moment they had both known was inevitable. Lily Anderson. He said, his voice strong, yet trembling with vulnerability. You are my partner, my strength, my future. Will you marry me? The room erupted applause and cheers, crashing like a wave, but Lily heard none of it. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered back the only words that mattered. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the kiss that followed was both tender and triumphant, a seal on a promise born not of wealth or power, but of whispers shared in the shadows of danger. Later, as the gala continued with music and celebration, Lily found herself at the balcony overlooking the glittering city, Ethan's arm wrapped around her waist. Do you realize what we have become? She asked softly, gazing at the streets far below where once she had walked home, after double shifts, anonymous and unseen. We are not just survivors, Lily, he replied, his lips brushing her temple. We are builders. Together we are stronger than the storms that tried to break us. We are the power couple, not because of the empire or the wealth, but because we chose each other when it mattered most. She leaned into him, her ring catching the city lights, a symbol not of possession, but of partnership. For the first time, she understood that love was not about grand gestures or flawless lives, but about the whispered truths shared in moments of fear and hope. As the night wore on, Ethan guided her back inside, where allies and rivals alike offered congratulations. The power dynamics of the city had shifted, not only because Ethan Cross had secured his empire, but because Lily Anderson had rewritten its rules. Together they embodied a new kind of strength, fierce, tender, and unbreakable. And when the orchestra swelled and he drew her into a dance, his lips brushed her ear once more, whispering words that made her heart race even faster than the night of poisoned wine. Forever begins now. If you have followed Lily and Ethan's journey this far, you already know this was never just a story about danger or wealth. It was a story about how a single whisper can change everything, about how love can be born in the quietest of warnings and grow strong enough to withstand betrayal, fear, and the storms of the world. Think about it: one moment of awareness, one act of courage, and a waitress who thought she was invisible altered the fate of a billionaire who seemed untouchable. That is the magic of love stories like these. They remind us that the smallest voices can carry the greatest power, and that intimacy, trust, and vulnerability are far stronger than money, influence, or even danger itself. As you reflect on what just unfolded, ask yourself, what would you whisper if it meant saving the person you love most? Would you have the courage Lily did to step forward to risk everything to change someone's destiny with just a breath of words? That question lingers long after the final page, and it is why stories like this matter. They give us hope. They make our hearts race, and they remind us of the strength hidden inside ordinary people. If this story stirred you, if it made you believe that love can bloom in impossible places, and that whispers can echo louder than shouts, then do not let it end here. Share your thoughts. Tell us what part made your heart stop, what scene made you lean closer, what promise whispered in the night you wish someone would say to you. And if you are craving more passion, more danger, more billionaires undone by the simplest of emotions, then stay with us, because more stories are coming, each one ready to make you feel, to make you dream, and to make you wonder what could happen if you were in Lily's shoes. Subscribe, follow, and never miss the next chapter. In this world where love is the greatest power of all, and sometimes the quietest words carry the loudest truths,